Well, my mind keeps going through them changes. Got the old song there from my buddy Miles, because my mind keeps going through them changes. Interesting stuff going on all around the world of sports, of course. And welcome to Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest, Greenlight Ventures presentation. And Bury Your Bookie, as always, brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting site and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on while the games are in progress, which can be some very treacherous undergoings, as you have to decide then the ultimate Shakespearean question: to hedge or not to hedge. If you think you really know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest. You pick 5 games each week against the spread. It's not easy, very challenging, and you have a chance to win weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. Now, if you're involved in casino play, they have it all for you as well. You can play poker, you can play blackjack, you can indulge in over 150 slot games at Bet Online. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. So we immediately surveyed the odds, and we're going to bring Troy West in here because we want to. I mean, you talk about bringing the heat. We have the hottest handicapper on the planet right now about to join us here on the program. But I always do a peripheral survey when the odds first come out, the lines for college and pro football, and I try to find one that looks to me to be out of whack. And that was the case with the Buffalo Bills. We mentioned this, the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. That line appeared to be an atrocity when it came out at 1.5. It immediately jumped to 3. And now it hovers at 2.5 for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the New York Jets have made a coaching change, something that they rarely, if ever, do. In fact, Woody Johnson, who does look a lot like Woody Allen. If you ever run into Woody Johnson somewhere, you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, man. I love everything you want to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask. As we bring in, speaking of sexy guys, Troy West looking especially appealing to everybody, especially you degenerates out there, because of, Troy, how are you, first of all? We're going all the way out to Seattle, Washington here, early in the morning. Troy West joins us, and he's back in his familiar digs because he was on the road. This guy's traveling the world with his winnings. He's in Palm Springs, staying at the old Sinatra mansion. He's in Las Vegas. Steve Wynn says, hey, you can use my home. And here he is, went with a cup of coffee early in the morning in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, out of Seattle, Washington. Troy West, how are you, my friend?
Doing great. Boy, we had a fun opening night of hockey. Your Florida Panthers came out on a hot start last night. Boy, they looked outstanding. Yeah, it's fun. This is a great time of year. You got the NBA right around the corner. We've got the NHL in full force, Major League Baseball. These playoffs have been unbelievable. These baseball playoffs have been nothing but head scratchers for me, Defo. Holy smokes.
No doubt. And you've been saying this. In fact, most of the people that we've had on the show and anybody that you talk to in sports, but you've been particularly emphasizing the idea that you could have thrown an umbrella over the 12 teams that were going into the baseball playoffs and not necessarily been considered insane, no matter who you picked in the eventual outcome. We saw an example of that last year when 150-1 before the season started, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Snakes, made it into the World Series and nearly pulled off the impossible. And, of course, their opponent there was unexpected as well, as the Texas Rangers are the defending world champions, although no chance to defend now since they failed. Both those teams failed to make the postseason this year. So pretty much wide open. And while you're drinking coffee, I am gargling with Visine here because I'm getting ready to watch 4 baseball games today, as the people here in Florida are all having great concern about this Hurricane Milton, which is going to hit the West Coast, not necessarily the area that we reside in, but there's always some schmutz that happens weather-wise, and so you do get some impact, and our thoughts naturally are of great concern for the people on the West Coast who just got hammered a couple of weeks ago with a hurricane that didn't even hit their area, and there's still a lot of junk flying around there. But here's where I was going at the beginning of the show, and I mentioned, I'm looking at this game before any of the factors that started to come into play here, coaching change, and I guess we were aware of the status of Josh Allen, that it was suspect whether or not he was going to play. I saw that line come out at 1.5. Maybe that was related to Allen's possible absence from the lineup in this game, and that would be a tremendous consideration. But how do you feel about it? It's almost always an infusion of enthusiasm for some reason for teams. Rarely are they depressed when there's a coaching change during the course of the season. And I'm looking at the stats here on this. Since 2010, teams are 15 and 12 straight up when they've introduced an interim coach during the course of a season, and 16 and 11 against the spread. That stat diminishes somewhat straight up if you go back to 2000, where interim coaches are 16 and 21 in their first effort. But how much consideration do you give to that? And do I need to rethink my position entirely because of the Josh Allen situation, whether or not he's going to play would make a huge difference. And B, the fact that Ulrich is now the interim head coach, and maybe the Jets become inspired from what looked like a very dull level of enthusiasm for playing a game after that game in London. How much of a consideration do you give to interim head coaches coming into a ball game in your handicapping?
A lot. I think that's, yeah, it's a great question, but everything to me, it's case by case, right? That goes for all sports, whether you see this in baseball, whether we saw with the Seattle Mariners this year. They cut the manager in the middle of the playoff race. They hired Dan Wilson. Ended up falling up short, but Dan Wilson ends up, I think they end up going 21 and 13 under him or something like that. And, they just missed the playoffs. In this situation, this one's a wonky one to me because I have a hard time believing Aaron Rodgers didn't have a hand in it, right? So if the players were really kind of had a hand in it and said, "Hey, we're done with this guy. We want this guy in there," then I think they rally around it. But if it was a true blind side, like, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't want this to happen. We're 2-3. We're not even a quarter way through the season. Why are we getting rid of our head coach? Then I think it could have the reverse effect. So it's kind of tough for me to handicap this particular situation because I truly wonder, are these guys like, hey, hell yeah, Robert Sala's gone, or is it one of those situations like, Jesus, we're 5 games into this fucking season and we're gonna fire the coach? And the other thing I thought was bizarre is, the defense was playing pretty good. I wouldn't put the fault on the defense this year. The offense has been the issue, and that's who Aaron Rodgers brought in all his guys on offense. So I'm leaning Buffalo for sure. That's where I'm headed. And for me, it's more of just like you said, the way the Jets have been playing. They have really no culture going on there. I knew going into the season, we actually talked about on the show. It sounded like the Aaron Rodgers thing. There's a lot of players that just don't want to be around that guy anymore. So I think they're 2-3 for a reason. In Buffalo, boy, they're dying for a win.
And the line now, it was 1.5. It went to 3. Now it's down to 2 and a hook. Normally, I would look at that and immediately send in every dime that I could get my hands on, borrowing money from even ex-wives. Hey, can you give me some of that alimony money back,
Yeah.
please? I got a bet, cannot lose. And I would feel pretty comfortable about that. But the Josh Allen factor clearly would be more significant than the fact that the Jets changed coaches. And how devastating is it? That's not the first time we've seen a guy play a game in London, lose in embarrassing fashion, and not make the trip back. Dennis Allen, who you would have to think is very much on a hot plate right now, if not the hot seat outright, with the New Orleans Saints, who many Saints fans point the finger straight in the face of Dennis Allen and say they will never win as long as this guy is the head coach of this team. And after getting off to a sensational start, they have now lost their last 3 ball games and appear destined for a season that is far subpar in terms of what they were thought about after 2 weeks. That's the other thing in the NFL. We've talked about a lot, and almost any handicapper has taken into consideration the wild swings that we're seeing from the first couple of weeks of the season to what has transpired since in the subsequent 3 weeks. And you can really get yourself into trouble with a misread if you're evaluating a team after a couple of weeks, either positively or negatively, because we've seen a lot of changes take place in terms of the overall level of play, with maybe the exception of the Cincinnati Bengals, who, for some reason, Troy, continue to stagger around in spite of the great stats being put up by Joe Burrow.
Yeah, no, I agree. It will be interesting to see. Jacob Hayner was actually a UW guy at one point, played at Fresno State. He takes the reins in New Orleans. Oh, I mean that this he's a great quarterback. I like him a lot. He kind of reminds me of Drew Brees, but this guy is so far ready for the NFL, and he's got to take on a Todd Boyles team on Sunday, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense has been sporadic this year. But I think Todd Boyles, that's not who I would want to go against in my first NFL career start. That guy's a great defensive mind. So, yeah, the NFL, it's been fascinating this year. I mean, you got so many teams: the Buffalo Bills, the Eagles, the Cowboys. I mean, the list goes on and on. The Seahawks out here get out off to these 3-0 starts, and now it's like, holy smoke, this is desperation mode. I mean, if they don't start getting some wins, you're going to miss the playoffs. So looking forward to that game Sunday. Might even have an official play for you on that game here, Defo, in just a little bit.
All right, that sounds good. But we do have to give you all kinds of accolades. You sent me, and this was legitimate stuff on your service. Troy wins. You gave advice to your clients and followers. And as you mentioned, if you were a $10, $15 player, you made thousands.
Thousands.
Thousands, ladies and gentlemen, with Troy West, a legitimate, and you showed me the stuff that you would put out. 9-0 last week.
9-1 over the weekend. We went 7-0 in college football again, and we went 2-1. Or actually, our only loss in the NFL. We got lucky. I'll say we got lucky in the NFL. We did have the Baltimore Ravens
Yes.
with 2.5, so we got lucky there. Hey, sometimes lucky's better than good. Our only loss, believe it or not, was a teaser bet. I don't know if the viewers like teaser bets, but the Seattle Seahawks burned us on a teaser on Sunday. But we did. We went 7-0 in college football, and then we came back 2-1 in the NFL with a record of 9-1 over the weekend. So we had some very happy customers last weekend. It's been a pretty consistent run the last 45 to 60 days at TroyWins.com.
Yeah, one of our mutual friends, the great Jack Friedman, is extolling the virtues of your selecting powers and your crew, saying that this man is unbelievable. We've never seen anything quite like it. Of course, still winning very much on a regular basis here on a show. 2-1 last week. Got burned in a pro game, but as you said, just nailing college football. And now 10-2 overall on the selections you've made right here on Bury Your Bookie. So we want to get to the stuff that you have for the people. They don't want to hear me talk. They don't want to look at me with this primitive microphone setup that I've been forced to go with today. I feel like I'm at the Comedy Store or something. It's like, hey, you in the back, shut the fuck up. I'm performing up here. And don't forget to tip your servers and the bartenders. But we had a little fiasco with equipment yesterday. And so here I am with a handheld mic. It almost reminded me of the days when I first got into newspaper writing and sports journalism, so to speak. And I'd be at the Olympic Auditorium in LA, and this predated what was known as video display terminals, which were kind of a revolutionary device in the sports writing and the newspaper industry, where you could actually type your story on site and then just hit a button. And I used to have to go to a payphone, fight two guys that had just lost money on the Mexican fighter, grab a payphone, call the newspaper, and dictate a story. And so people will be looking, going, hey, you're going to get off that phone, Joe? I mean, I got to make a call here. I'm trying to get a cab. And you'd be sitting there going, and he threw a jab, comma, jab, comma, jab, comma. And the guy was going, what was that? Jab? How do you spell that? On the other end. So we're making do with what we have. But perhaps we can make enough money with your picks this week for me to purchase a new set of equipment. So let's get right into it. Where are you going to start out, Troy?
Yeah, we're going Friday night, college football, Arizona State at home. They're taking on Utah. I think this is the return of Cameron Rising. This guy's a fantastic quarterback. Utah plays substantially better when this guy plays. The line is all the way to 6, which is a lot of points to take on the road. They're going on the road and laying 6. But I'm going with Kyle Whittingham and the Utah Utes. -6 at Arizona State. I think they get the job done. I think Cameron Rising makes his return, and this is a big win for them. 35-17. Give me Utah minus the points. Saturday, we're going out. Washington State takes on Fresno State. Washington State's laying 3.5. This is both teams coming off a bye week. Washington State's the much better football team. This was a head scratcher to me. 3.5 is way too low. Fresno State coming off a blowout loss to UNLV, 56-14. Give me Washington State -3.5 is my second selection. And then third, going Sunday, I'm actually going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers -3.5 on the road against the Saints. Jacob Hayner making his NFL debut. They're on the short week. They just look like crap again against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Give me Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield. I think get enough points to take on this game. I think the Buccaneers win this one 24-13. Those are my three selections. So we got Utah minus the points, Washington State minus the points, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers minus the points. So hate laying that many points. You'll get 3 road favorites, but that's going to get us to 3-0 this weekend.
All right, let's hope so. And I know you're even hitting hockey. Well, you're
Yes.
cracking. Congratulations. They got a win yesterday. What were you, 2-0 in hockey as well during the course of the week?
Yes, you know it's funny. The Kraken ended up losing that game yesterday. They lost
Oh, they
that
did.
game.
They were up like by a substantial margin when I saw the
It
last
was
score.
it was a fun one. So we had the under 6 yesterday, and the first period goes 0-0. So we're like, God, that was the easy, great pick. 5 goals were scored in the second period. 5 goals. The Kraken scored 2 goals in the first 45 seconds, and then the Blues scored 3 goals in a 3 minute span. So it's 3-2. We're like, well, fuck, there goes that money. And then they went scoreless. They went scoreless in the third period. There wasn't even an empty net goal. So 3-2 Blues win. We go under 6 in that game, and then we actually had your beloved Florida Panthers yesterday.
It's
So
always a nightmare when you're having to sweat out an empty netter at the end of the game, one way or
oh,
the other.
that's the one thing about hockey I do not like is that oh God, you get burned on that.
And
Holy
now
shit.
coaches, they used to wait till it was inside the last minute to pull the goalie, so to speak.
Yep.
And now they're pulling the goalie earlier than ever. I mean, it would be like 3 minutes to go, and they're figuring, okay, if we don't do something right here, we're going to lose the game anyway. So we may as well take a shot. And then if you're a better, it's devastating because you see a guy
Yeah.
flick one from his own goal line, and it looks
Yep.
like it's
Yep.
heading for the net, and then at the last second, kind of like we're hoping with this hurricane, although it doesn't look too promising, that it jogs just a little bit and misses the post. All right, a full slate of baseball. This is one of those days that if you're a baseball fan, you're going East Coast time from 3
Yep.
o'clock till midnight watching games. All 4 series are back in action. Any general thoughts about what's transpired so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocking is so far. I am going to be very curious if we do ultimately see what we think are the two best teams right now, which are probably the Yankees and I hate to say it, the Padres, right? So will we get that big World Series? Are we going to get Yankees Padres or Yankees Dodgers? Shocked to see the Mets where they're at right now, up 2-1 on the Phillies. Can they close it out? Will the Royals make the series interesting? And then that Tigers Guardians series. I don't think either of those two teams are getting past the next series. But I was laughing today, Defo. When's the last time Alex Cobb pitched? And here he is pitching a meaningful game for the Guardians tonight on the road in Detroit. I'm curious to see what he has to offer today. But shocking so far. I'm really curious if we'll see a true Cinderella story. Will we see a team like the Detroit Tigers win the World Series? Will we see the Mets in the World Series? My gut tells me no. I'm actually not official picks, but I do like the Guardians to pick up a win on the road today, and I like the Yankees to bounce back and pick up a win on the road today. But a lot of great games. I'm looking forward to it. I think the Phillies push this thing to the fifth game as well. I think we're going to see some of these series extend to a game 5.
Thinking and speaking of pink slips, people have been amazed for years. The question is always asked, how does he keep his job? And if you're looking at the Yankees, if they make this early exit, I know Aaron Judge has been ice cold. And unfortunately, like other great players, some other great players in the past, there was a time where everybody thought Barry Bonds was a postseason choker. He ended up having a couple of sensational postseasons, although at the time I think Victor Conti was coaching third base and juicing him as he was going around. But whatever it was that inspired him to those great performances, the early criticism and disparaging remarks about Bonds' play and being a choker were based on a very small sample size. But we have a significant sample size with Aaron Judge, and he was ice cold at the end of the season. And I'm thinking if the Yankees don't make it out of this first round of the playoffs, how does Brian Cashman keep his job? How does Aaron Boone, the much criticized Aaron Boone, how could they possibly be invited back to coach the team or manage the team and be the general manager next year?
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I mean, even watching Carlos Stanton in that lineup, I mean, my God, he is just, I mean, what happened to him? I mean, we talk about a guy, when he was with your beloved Marlins. I mean, my God, the guy was, I mean, when he was added to that Yankee roster, I thought, holy crap, these guys are going to win multiple World Series. And, it's been ugly. The way that the lineup is constructed, it's ugly. The bullpen isn't great. Even the starting pitching right now is subpar at best. So, I would agree with you. If they don't get out of this series, I think Boone's for sure gone, and it will be interesting to see the jury out on Cashman because I just don't like the way that lineup's constructed, and then it'll be interesting to see what Juan Soto does this year as well.
Of course, yeah, they're going to do everything in their power to try and retain Juan Soto. Although the Mets supposedly are coveting. Well, who wouldn't after the season that he had? He
Yeah.
was consistent all year long. Kind of dropped off from a batting average standpoint towards the end of the year, but still put up monster numbers by comparison to virtually anybody in the game. And on top of that, when you have that kind of power and those kind of stats in home runs and RBIs, people are willing to sacrifice a little bit
Yep.
in terms of considering. Is 300 even considered a fair barometer of having a great season from a hitting standpoint anymore? Or do we have to drop that down to like 280? You rarely see. I remember looking early in the year in the National League, and you had like three guys hitting 300 midway through the season, which what we used to look and I remember looking in the agatype when I was a young kid and a big time sports fan, and we were disgusted if the 10th guy in the league was batting 299 and made the list. But I think we have to open our eyes to considering that clearly that's not a stat that people put as much weight in as they used to.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, out here, the big talk is with Julio Rodriguez, who I think ended up batting 272, and people thought, wow, he still batted above 270. People were actually genuinely thrilled with that, and I'm going, holy smokes, this guy is making 50 million. He's our top paid player, and 272 is acceptable. So I agree with you. I would think at least two or three guys in your lineup need to be pushing that 300 mark, and boy, it's almost non-existent. I actually heard a stat on No Filter. I believe it was Eric Burns and Will Clark were saying that was it three total guys in the National League batted 300 this year. It might even been one. I know Luis Urias is for the Padres, but I just couldn't
Otani ended
believe
up
it.
over 300 also.
Yeah, yeah. So
He
it's just
closed with a rush. He was batting 289 when he had that sensational game here against the Marlins in late September. And that was when he eclipsed the 50-50 during that series. And in that game, he was like 6 for 6 with 50 RBIs and a couple of home runs.
yeah.
And from that point on, his batting average really made an ascent. And he ended up, I think, hitting 309 for the year and just missed winning the Triple Crown because the Rise went into a slump towards the end of the season. Very uncharacteristic for him. We had the pleasure of being able to watch this guy. Second coming, I mean, it's appropriate he's with the Padres because he reminds a lot of people of Tony Gwynn, the way he hits. With me, I remember covering the Angels back in the day when they acquired Rod Carew. And Carew was very similar to Louis Arise in the way that he approached hitting and just hit it solid line drives to all fields. That seems to be a component of baseball that isn't there anymore. And thus, the consideration that 270 is an acceptable batting average, even if you have under
Yep.
30 home runs and 80 or 90 RBIs. It's kind of crazy. All right. Anything, the NBA season coming up, you're not inclined to bet NBA preseason. No, we were roundly ostracized for saying that betting NFL preseason games was a ridiculous proposition and that you ought to check in with the nearest therapy center if that's what you're doing. And I was reminded by many people who were referring to me as some kind of clown that the unders were like 16 out of 22 during the preseason. And or a very favorable position to take. Can you put any credibility into NBA? That seems to be the league that has the least regard for preseason activity. Outside of getting to see LeBron James assist on a Bronny James basket, I don't know what level of interest there is. I don't even know when the Heat play their preseason games here in South Florida. It's not exactly widely publicized. It may even be a secret. But do you give any credibility? Is there anybody out there that you know that is betting NBA preseason games?
No, that's I can say that. Don't know anybody doing that. I'm with you. I think you just see so many guys that aren't going to be on the active roster, and when the big guys do get in the game, it's for, I mean, way less than a quarter, right? So no, I will say that is one sport I do not dabble into, and in my network of people, I don't know of many people dabbling into the NBA, and it's going to be a fun NBA season this year. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a 2-3 team race in the East with the Sixers, the Knicks, and the Celtics. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens out West. But I'm intrigued by that New York Knicks team. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. A lot of fun to watch.
I would imagine the odds have swayed significantly. I know Julius Randle was a popular player, and when he was healthy, acquitted himself very well and looked like he was going to be an asset. I don't know if he made them a championship team. And I like DiVincenzo, who they
Yeah.
departed with in that deal as well. But I thought Karl Anthony Towns had really matured in a lot of ways last year with Minnesota. And there was a time I thought Minnesota would be a candidate to win the NBA championship. They faltered in the postseason, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that kind of, well, there were a few shekels that went up in smoke on that on my part. But yeah, I love this acquisition because you didn't get that consistency out of Julius Randle, and he was injured a lot. And I think Karl Anthony Towns is a perfect missing link and missing piece. I don't want to be cancel cultured by referring to him as a link. Somehow somebody will find that politically incorrect, but we mean that in the sense of being a component. In the sense of being a component, I thought that was a great trade. I mean, congratulations to Rose in the front office there for putting together what looks like a team that can contend with the Boston Celtics, who many people thought was a Fugazi team last year.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And Tom Thibodeau is such a great coach. I think he's going to provide Carl Anthony Towns something he doesn't necessarily have all the time, which is toughness. So Thibodeau, I think, is going to be a great guy to play under. And like you said, that starting five, if they stay healthy throughout the course of the year, that's as good as it gets. A lot of those guys have played together even through college. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'll be pulling for the Knicks this year. I think that's a great roster.
All right, and after this great start that you had in the NHL, do you have a favorite to win it all? Edmonton, I guess, has the lowest odds. They took the Panthers to the wall and then lost that dramatic Game 7. Fantastic stuff. I don't know that you could ask for any more excitement than we got out of the postseason in the NHL. That seems to be true every year. But any lean in any direction towards who's going to ultimately take the Stanley Cup home this year?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see the same two teams in it. To be honest with you, hockey sometimes you don't get as much parity as you'd like. We saw the Avalanche in there a couple years. We've seen the Lightning take down a couple. My gut's telling me the Panthers again. To be brutally honest with you, I still think they've got a great roster, veteran team, well coached. My money would be on the Florida Panthers to repeat.
Yeah, it all depends on Sergei Bobrovsky,
Yeah.
who's had more than his share of ups and downs. At one time, we didn't know if he could read the big E on the top of the eye chart. The way pucks were flying past him, and then he really had a great year last year, and had a couple of slip ups in the postseason, but for the most part was spectacular, especially in the early rounds. And so I think, well, probably true of all hockey clubs. Just like you depend on pitching in Major League Baseball, you're going to be depending largely reliant on goaltending. And if you
Yep.
don't get
Yep.
good goaltending, you're probably not going to go anywhere. All right,
Yep.
what's the weather like in Seattle these days? And I mean, we're here bracing for yet another monster hurricane. Not that anybody should pay attention to global warming. Certainly, none of our Republican representatives seem to have any inclination to believe there's anything to it. But how are things going out there in the Northwest?
Well, it's October, what, October 9th. I got to play golf in 75 degrees on Monday, and I'll be playing golf today in 60 degrees. So it's not all bad in Seattle. As much as people think it all does rain here, we're still playing golf in October. So 60 degrees, it's not too bad. We've got a great Thursday night football game out here tomorrow, where the 49ers come into Seattle. That's another game. Boy, if the Niners fall to 2-4, I'm curious what happens with that situation. And if the Seahawks lose, they'll drop to 3-3, and that will be three straight losses for them. So something's got to prevail tomorrow. One team is headed the wrong direction. I'm looking forward to that game tomorrow on Thursday Night Football.
People can start ripping those tickets up on the 49ers to win it all if they end up at 2-4. Troy, it's always a pleasure. How can people get your stuff? Because, as I said, and this is documented, as they always say in the industry, documented. He sent me this stuff. And, of course, I sat on my hands. But you have really been knocking it out of the park. So how can people get in on the action?
Yeah, the website is troywins.com. Everything's set up there. We've got great prices. We do not try to gouge the customers. We've got some great deals, including 7 days for $7. That's a great bargain. The Instagram is It's Troy West on Instagram. We post a lot of free pics there, promotional stuff, all sorts of cool things going on. Troywins.com, and the Instagram is It's Troy West.
Troy, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much
Thanks
for
a
being
lot,
with us.
Devo. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, Troy West. Man's been incredible. So I would think that it would be well advised to listen to some of his suggestions here. He likes Utah -6, Arizona State. He likes Washington State minus 3.5. Sees that as a complete mismatch against Fresno State, and he's going with the Bucks against the backup Saints quarterback. Bucks laying 3.5 on the road against New Orleans. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of Bury Your Bookie. We'll have Mike Jones with us tomorrow and more insight into the baseball playoffs. Enjoy all the postseason games, and we'll have more of a preview of what's coming up on college and pro football slates as well. For everybody connected with Bury Your Bookie, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks so much for being with us, and have a great day, everybody.